In this presentation, we're going to look at the various canonical forms of Greek fineware, painted wares. And by about 600 BC, again, these forms became sort of fixed. And so we can look at them whether they're painted geometrically or whether they're painted black figure or painted red figure. The forms pretty much stay the same. And so form tends to represent a combination of things. Function. So you develop a form that works for its purpose, and why should it change? It's perfect as it is. But then there are other factors such as ritual as well, that the forms tend to reflect or be used in everyday rituals, whatever they might be. We're going to look at a number of them. And so they take on a higher significance, maybe even a ritualistic significance in that regard. So form versus function, form as a representation of ritual, and that's what we mean by canonical. They became kind of cemented and identified in the mindset of this Greek culture with the rituals they were being engaged in as well. And so we're going to look at various images, bearing in mind that a lot of the images that we have showing the use of the form occurred on the painted pots themselves, the actual paintings. So what's going on there as well? When we think of 5th century Athens, had a colony, it's estimated, of about 300 potters. We know the names of many because they signed them. They would say so-and-so Epoye made this. And then someone else painted it, someone else drafted it, or the same person did both. So there's this colony of about 300 of these guys and women, and they're making these things and they're marketing them presumably. And again, always bear in mind that ceramic pottery represented kind of a poor man's metalware. So they're imitating probably metal forms to begin with. What we know is that the artistry of this painted material reached such a level that they seem to have competed with metalwares on the banquet tables of even of aristocrats. So these are minor arts, but they achieved a certain point where they became sort of popular artifacts, popular culture. And we also know that the paintings kind of begin with these geometric designs and kind of enhancing, drawing out the shape of the forms as they evolved, to sort of religious paintings, usually having to do with the Greek Iliad and the Odyssey, so the Homeric traditions, the epic traditions. But at some point in the 5th century, the artists sort of lowered their visibility and looked around them to capture glimpses of the world around them, and perhaps really catching glimpses of the function of the form, what it was being used for, as a way to market it. Oh, I'm having a dinner party. I want party vessels, for example. And so they're, in a way, they're not fully utilized windows to daily practice, rites of passage, and sort of salient features of Greek life. Okay, so we can divide their function into 4 groups. There were forms used with the drinking parties, what's known as the Greek male symposium, and we'll talk about that when we get to Greek gender relations. But in any event, a number of forms, quite a few, most of them have to do with the various elements used in these Greek male drinking parties, these bonding parties, that would occur. Again, the ancient Greek calendar didn't go have weekends. It would go sort of from festival to festival. And the festivals tended to fall every 3 weeks to a month. And so when these festivals occurred, everything would kind of close down for a couple of days and people would party. So the banquets were sort of arranged by the men around these festivals, first of all. Secondly, there are storage forms, the amphora, the pelike, the stamnos, the hydria, and we'll look at those. Third are the forms that had to do with personal hygiene. So we'll look at the aribalos, the alabastron, the pyxis, and the plemokoe. And then the last are the ritual ceremonies, rites of passage, marriages, and funerals in particular. And there were forms that were dedicated to those specifically. So the canonical forms, here's just the list. And first we'll look at the drinking vessels. And so there's kind of two forms. There are those which they use to mix the wine and water. So one theory is that Mediterranean wine was too much sun. It couldn't really produce they tend to produce a thick raisin wine, kind of like a port or a sherry. So it's super sweet, super alcoholic, and you would dilute it with water. And so the crottiers are mixing bowls for the mixing of the wine and the water. Here we're actually looking at the interior of a bowl, a drinking goblet, a kylix, and we're looking at young men, and they're doing the stork dance. They've got their drape on their arm, they've got a cane, and they're dancing around. And one of them is reaching something into the column crottier, which is demonstrated by its column-like poles that go up to the rim from the shoulder. And he's reloading, shall we say. Volu crottiers, and again, these names, we know the ancient name crottier, but Volu crottier, it's a modern designation of the form. And the volu crottier is one in which the handles come up and kind of curl like the volu leaves of an acanthus plant above the rim in this way. On the left, we see again a red figure painting of the bartender. He's got a pitcher in his hand and he's receiving an empty kylix, and he's using the pitcher to refill it using a column crottier. So crottiers are big mixing bowls. They can be about 30 centimeters tall. They can be a meter tall. They can be big enough for someone to actually get in them. It depends on the size of the party you're organizing. And one suspects that they had them not only for these rituals, but also for like things like weddings and banquets. And so it might be kind of an heirloom, the big ones, handed on generation to generation in the family. Kylix crottier, again, kind of an odd name, but the handles come up from the lower portion of the body. It's a horizontal bending handle, sort of like the kylix or the buds of a flower. Sorry about that. We're looking at two red figure versions. On the left, we have the death of Patroclus being taken off by Hermes and these angels from the battlefield at Troy. Bell crottier and Stamnos. A bell crottier looks like an upside down bell. We have this lekythos on the right, and it's portraying the bell crottier. She's got a ladle, she's got these two drinking goblets, and there's another form that we'll get to on the floor. And stamnos. Stamnos is a high-shouldered jar with horizontal handles at the shoulder and a kind of a cylindrical neck. And you can see it being used above in a red figure painting of a stamnos, and the lady again is ladling out drinks for the women standing around in some sort of female ritual, probably. Here we see an example, and stamnoi are very, very common forms for storage. In fact, temples would store money in them. So we have records, the temples of Delos, so many stamnoi of cystophory or drachmas or what have you. So they're kind of an all-purpose storage jar, but as you can see, they can be used as well for mixing the wine and water. Okay, moving on. Second form that's kind of unique is the rhyton. So the rhyton, here we can see various forms of it. We can see this donkey rhyton in the middle. There's a pig snout rhyton down the lower left, and there's a foot rhyton. And then we see a red figure painting of a young man banqueting, reclining on his cleanai, on his banquet table, and he's holding up a rhyton in the form of a forehalf of a horse. And notice how the horse's hoof has a hole in it, and so you have a big pitcher-like thing at the top. You pour in the wine and oil there, the mix, the wine and water, and then he holds it up and he lets it flow into his cup. Okay. Probably the pig one comes through the snout, the donkey one through his nose, probably his nostrils, and the toe, I guess, on the foot. What's going on here? This is how they would aerate the wine. So part of the pleasure of drinking wine is the bouquet, the aroma that it releases when you mix it with the atmosphere. And so part of it is just aerating the wine, enjoying the experience. But there's another factor here that we have to bear in mind as well, and that is that as you drink the wine, you start to get inebriated, and I think that these elements become kind of hard to handle as you get more and more drunk. And so part of this is kind of party favors. It's an etiquette. How well can you handle your wine? Can you handle these rather uh, complex forms? They're not all that easy to wield at the same time. Upper left shows Dionysus in the story of how he took over a pirate ship and turned the pirates into dolphins. And it's in the black figure in the bowl of a kylix. I believe he's holding a Rhyton. I think that's the point, right? Yes, he's holding a Rhyton. You can't quite make it out at this scale. Um, Oinokoe is a pitcher, and it really means a portion of wine. So a portion of wine or a pitcher of wine. In the left, we see a woman, and she's pouring wine into her fiale, and she's facing a man in armor. Maybe it's her husband, and he's about to leave for war, and they're having a toast before he departs. So a significant moment. To the right, more disturbing in a way, is basically the Attic black figure version of a Sambo mug. We have an Oinokoe into the head of an African person. And so, again, it's sort of taking this African person as a style, a topos, and creating a drinking vessel out of him. And we might, modern, this is racist, we might be disturbed by this. I like to think as well, though, that here is proof that Africans were in Athens. And we don't know how many, they don't leave a textual footprint, but they keep popping up in the representations. And to me, that's an exciting thing because I want to know more. What's going on? How is this person here? It's exotic, and yet could it have been commonplace? So that's just another interesting component. I'm thinking of the artist and the artist's interest in conveying this exotic representation in the Fineware. Another weird form. This is called the psictor. So this is a wine cooler. This is a double-walled instrument in which you would put maybe water in a hole in the side, and it would insulate. You pour the wine into the top, and it would help keep it cool, which matters, especially in the summertime in Greece when it's frequently in the 90s to 100 degrees Fahrenheit this way. The other thing is that it has a keel on it, and you could set it in a crater full of water and keep it even cooler that way, and it will stay upright because it's balancing that way. Notice the one on the floor there with the two women on the likathos to the right as well. And we hear that they would sometimes pack them in snow if there was snow, a crater full of snow. And so it's another component. You don't need too many, and maybe it's one of these heirloom forms that would be handed on. Maybe it came as a set with the crater. You get the crater and the psictor combined. Not too many representations of them. Not too many of them seem to have survived. Okay, moving on to drinking cups, and there are three principal forms: the cantharos, the kylix, and the skiphos. One more, fiale, so four principal forms. Here is the cantharos. Cantharos is a big cup, usually on a pedestal foot, and designated by the giant rabbit ear-like handles that loop up over the rim and come down and touch the rim. Big, thick handles on the one there. The red figure, one of Dionysus. Dionysus, the god of wine, always going to be kind of associated with these drinking festivals. Up above, we have a black figure. This is maybe the one there from that representation. Anyway, he's holding a cantharos. Cantharos is a word, as a symbol, appears in Linear B tablets, so it's an ancient drinking cup. The one on the left is from Italy. It's a bucaro, so this black slipped form. But there you go with the cantharos. The kylix seems to be the most common one. It is a broad, shallow bowl, usually with horizontal handles on the side, on a pedestal foot. Again, in the middle we have a black figure one. Up to the right we have what is known as an Ionian eye cup. So this was a type of cantharos. They like to portray this feline face on it and produce somewhere on the islands of the Aegean and the Ionia. On the upper left, we see the young men doing the stork dance, and they're walking with their canes, and they're kind of balancing their cups on their hand. Again, there's kind of a ritual sort of thing going on here, where you have to know how, do you have enough skill to handle these drinking elements? It's a broad, shallow form. If you drink too much of it, can you spill it on yourself, basically? And is that part of the fun? The lower left, we have the interior. So this is the floor of a kylix, and it's portraying a man reclining at table. He's just received in his right hand a new kylix, fresh kylix, and the old one has got the kind of residue from what he finished. Probably he's eating food at the same time, so it's got kind of a residue of saliva, wine, and crumbs of bread or something. And he's doing something. It's called kotobos. He's flicking the residue at a gong. There's a metal thing on the wall to make a, okay, I finished one, bang, right? I always think, God, I would hate to have been the slave that has to clean up after these drinking parties. They're kind of ribald. The only thing is, I think of fraternity parties, and there's just something incredibly familiar about this, right? So, and I'll leave it with that. We know what we're talking about here. Skiffos is more of a cup. So this is a narrow, taller cup, and it tends to have handles that come right out horizontally from the rim. I often think maybe when you get too drunk for the kylix, they serve you in skiffos. Okay, we're going to give you the skiffos because it's less difficult to, more difficult to spill. And again, upper left, red figure, there's Dionysus with his thyrsus. Right, this is a later Italian form, Greek Italy, and it shows someone reclining at table. There's some sort of Homeric thing going on there that I can't describe. Lower left, this actually shows a hetaira, so a high-class courtesan or sex laborer, and she's being propositioned by a man approaching her with a bag of money, and she's blowing him off with her hand. That's the bag is too slim for her purposes there. But as we'll talk about later, it was customary that these party girls would be present at these symposia parties. And so the artist is portraying them as an inducement to buy this form, perhaps. Fiale, interesting form. It's a shallow bowl with a boss in the middle. So there is a metal one from the site of Gordium, the Phrygian site of Gordium. And again, pottery imitating metalware. Here we see two uses of this. So what you do apparently is you put your thumb up in the boss and you have to hold it and drink. It must be extremely difficult to use. And it's interesting that most of the representations I have encountered show the fiale being used with females, maybe female rituals, for example. So down below, lower left, we have a woman ladling into a fiale. They're both holding fiales, but there is a kylix hanging from the wall, and there's a sictor on the floor, and they're using the bel crater. On the right, we saw this one before. Maybe it's the husband and wife, and he's going off to battle, hopefully to return, but they are commemorating the moment in this way with a fiale. So I almost think fiales are almost sort of a ritual form. Storage jars. The four types: table amphora, the pelike, the stamnos, and the hydria. So here are the table amphoras. Amphora meaning held from both sides. It'll have two handles that go from the neck down to the rounded shoulder, usually with a cylindrical neck and then a thick sort of rim on it. Storage jars in that regard. The one on the right shows the, what's the word for it? Anyway, it shows the period of the transition from black figure to red figure. On the one side, there is the black figure of Heracles driving the cows of Apollo. On the other side, the exact same image, but it's in reverse, red figure. I still can't remember the name. I'll leave it there. So what's the difference? A pelike, we presume, it's an ancient name. It is a table amphora with a sagging body, so the lower sag, a bag shape kind of table amphora. in that regard. And we're seeing Heracles slaying something there, and he's using the whole body. The artist is using the whole body as a canvas to fill this story in. Stamnos we mentioned before, and a hydria, very unique. This is a three-handled storage vessel. It's primarily, hydria means it's a water jug. So you have two handles for hefting it from the side, and you have a upright handle, vertical handle to pour. So it's a pouring vessel as well. I love this. This is a black figure painting, and it's showing an interior. It's showing presumably the Pisistrated well house that he made at the Agora, and it's got these lion heads, spouts with water coming down, and we see women pouring, filling up their water jugs and taking them back to their houses. In the lower left, second figure, you can see she's got a little pillow on her head, and she's carrying the jug filled on her head. Questions I often have are these the women of the household, or are they servants? And it would suggest that this is a place where women could congregate and socialize. They got a duty going out to get the water, but they might hang out there and gossip or what have you as well. And it's really hard to capture glimpses of everyday life of everyday women in Athens. So this is an important one. Personal hygiene, moving on to the third of the four. And this has to do with cosmetics and what's the word for it? Deodorants. How did people keep clean when you couldn't take a shower every day, for example? So there were forms for that. Let's go through them to speed things up. Here's the Arybalos. It's a tiny little form about this big. It has a thick rim, flat rim with an aperture that could be plugged. This contained olive oil mixed with aromatic plants, so deodorants. And we can see in the red figure on the right, we can see athletes, and many of these are frequently found in the gymnasia. It's associated with the exercising and bathing that would go on at the gymnasium. So we can see the squiggly line. He's pouring out this mixture of olive oil. They didn't have deodorants. They didn't bathe frequently, and so they would use perfumes to cover their scent in this way. So we have the black figure with the swirl lines there. And they're very small. Presumably because of the aromatic plants, the perfume was very expensive as well. So you want to be able to control the wick the control of the flow. Then we have these kind of powder boxes, the Pyxis and the Plemocoe, which go along with women's bathing practices. And so what a Pyxis is, you can see there's one that's ivory and there's two above it. It's basically a jar that's cylindrically shaped or concave with a lid on it. A lid with a handle that you could pull it off, and they would keep their rouge in this or their white powder. We hear about all these different cosmetics that were used. And the red figure, black and white in the middle, shows a woman and it's moving day, and she's carrying her Pyxis. Her poor servant is carrying all her bedding and all this in that way. Plemocoe, slightly different, is kind of a more elaborate box on a pedestal foot, and the top half has a handle that would come off, and again, probably used for their cosmetics, their toiletries. So it's associated expressly with women's toiletries this way. I should point out that the women being portrayed here in the 5th century, it was totally inappropriate to portray freeborn property-holding women. These are probably courtesans, hetairae, once again, and so it's showing the toiletries of the hetairae who would come to the parties as well. And then we get to the forms of what I call rites of passage, the passage of life. So the two most important things besides birth would be weddings and burials. And there were forms that were canonically associated with them. The first one is the lebes gamikos. Lebes was a cauldron, so originally they would be big bronze cauldrons, and they would make these out of ceramic, and they're very large, 50 centimeters, not quite a yard tall maybe. And then if they were put on a pedestal foot, they would call the lebes gamikos the wedding lebes, the wedding cauldron. So you would pull these out for your weddings. And again, probably an heirloom kept in the family. Here we see down lower right, we can see the lower left, we can see the workmen pouring the wine into the lebes gamikos. You've got the oinokoe down below, so they're getting ready for the wedding banquet. Another important one associated almost exclusively with weddings is the lutrophoron, which means the water-carrying jug. And this is a very bizarre sort of form. It's got a very broad, sort of flaring, tall, flaring rim, neck and rim. It's got long handles that connect below the rim all the way down to the shoulder, and then the lower form is sort of like an amphora and blows out down to a pedestal foot this way. And on the left, we see the ritual. The bride is dressed with her crown as she's dressed up, and they're anointing her with the water, sort of purifying her before she will leave to go to her husband's house, presumably. And this wedding ritual was a process where the husband and his family, the groom would come and steal the woman from the household and bring her back to his household. So there's a ritual going on for her to prepare preparations before she gets married, and then the ritual of the banquet that would occur, presumably at the groom's house as well. The one in the middle is a geometric painted one, so it tells us the age of this form. And here is an actual red figure representation of a wedding procession. So the bride is being brought to the husband's house. The woman second to the right is carrying a plemokoe. There's a woman on the left playing a flute, an alit. And then this angel cherub is carrying the water jug, the lutrophoron. So they're all going with the bride to the husband's house. And then we have the ceremonies of the dead, and this is mainly the lekathos is principally associated with commemoration of the dead. So the lekathos, there is the normal lekathos, which is sort of has a flat shoulder, and then this tall neck with a very thick rim that could be used because you're pouring libations of oil into the ground. There's a squat lekathos in the middle, where it's a flat base, and then there's the hemispheric egg-shaped one down below. I'm failing in my memory of the names of the forms here. And again, they are associated with libations to the dead, and usually would be left at the memorial of the dead, the kippus, or whatever the memorial might be. And so the people could come and revere the dead and make libations to them. They learned, if we go back, we'll leave it here, but they learned how to create a white ground to the background to create this ethereal sort of scene of communion with the spirit of the deceased. So they're called white ground lekathoi in that regard. And we see on the left, we see a woman. She's slightly more darkened in than the one on the left. So presumably the one holding the alabastron, that's an alabastron, which is small, tall, cylindrical with a flaring rim. Seems to have been a woman's perfume jar, but what could be used in this manner. And she's commemorating the woman on the left, who is more ghostly in her appearance. And so maybe it's a mother who's lost a daughter, and she's pouring a libation to her daughter. On the right, we can see a kippus. This is a burial monument, a tombstone. And you can see the squat lekathoi and the lekathoi. There's a kylix on the steps to the kippus. And again, we've got a man here darkened on the right, and we've got apparently a female to the left in a kind of ghostly feature, or maybe it's both of them are male. I can't really make it out. But obviously, this is the way they would portray this spirit world. An interesting feature to this, sometimes the lutrophoron was used to commemorate death, presumably of young unmarried women who never experienced the rite of passage of getting married. And so they commemorate her with the lutrophoron. So here is this very famous black figure, lutrophoron, showing a funeral procession A close-up shows the women. Presumably the deceased woman is carrying the lucifer on, and the women around her are waving their hands above their heads in mourning, in wailing and mourning in this way. And so again, that's what I find unique about these forms, is how something for the happiest moment of a woman's life, the wedding, can be transited into commemorating her death, and used to represent both things in a rite of passage sort of process.